So you have seen other children like Tori in the school system, for example, when you were deciding how to place her, who had the label autism. What do you see as different between those children who are given a very set regime program for learning when compared to how your child is learning?
I wouldn't call it a set regime of learning that those other children had.
What would you call it?
They go to the same school as other kids. That would be about the extent of it. Because everything is prevent the behavior, not why is the behavior. So depending on the child, and Tori would be an example, had she just been submersed in school, those first behaviors, she would spend collectively 3 minutes a day in class, and the rest of the time would be out in the halls or swimming or doing stuff like that, and education would be zero, because that's the best way to prevent the behavior is take them right out.
So,
not as to why the behavior happens.
So how can you explain the behavior to us at ANCA is a form of communication? How can you explain that to people who treat the behavior versus treat the child developmentally?
For me, the best way to explain it is by example. Like with Tori in school, it's all been, I've been very close. Yeah, she'll be in the school, she's away from me a bit, but it's small windows. So if something comes up, we can talk about it right away. Or I have lots of stories that I share. The teachers she's had have been phenomenal, so they are open-minded. So they take what I feed them in stories and background and how Tori thinks and protests and everything, and they're able to adjust.
And what advice would you have to educators then, given the example you said that it's not I wouldn't call the structure regime for those children, rather the focus is on behavior rather than learning, which is different than my child. What advice do you have for educators who do not or have not learned about the autistic paradigm like you have?
For educators, it's just simple. Treat them like any other child. Like, don't change the rules. That's the main thing I've seen in my travels, my journey so far, is the fact that they're treated differently. They can't say, no, I don't want to write on the chalkboard. Tori does a scream or a wet noodle or a temper tantrum and it's pull her away. And it's like, if the other child stomps their foot and says, I don't want to do this, it's like, well, you know what? You're gonna do it. And parameters are set and boundaries are set and rules are to be followed. But when the child learns differently or can't communicate the same, all of a sudden all those rules and boundaries are thrown out. It's like, okay, you don't have to.